It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and in this video I'm going to take a look at the OSD on-screen display menu system of the Samsung C27HG70. The OSD is controlled by a joystick or a jog button at the back of the monitor towards the right side if you're looking at it from the front. Further to that, there are three sort of shortcut keys, game hotkeys, which you can see there's labels for them at the front of the monitor. They're actually on the underside of the bottom bezel. These can be assigned to various different sets of settings. I'll come on to that in a little bit. But if you press the joystick in, you get this little quick menu. The first option there, if you twiddle the joystick up, you can select that, is menu. To the left there's source, to the right to the right iSaver mode, and down there is power off. I should mention, if the monitor enters a low power state, so it loses signal to the computer, you can actually turn the monitor off by holding the joystick in for a couple of seconds. Whereas if you want to turn it off and the computer's on, like at the moment, you have to enter this little quick menu and press power off. The iSaver mode is explored in some detail in the written review, but just to reiterate, it's a low blue light setting, reduces the blue light output from the monitor significantly. It also significantly reduces the contrast. It gives you a very washed out image, which some people won't like, but it is technically supposed to be a bit more comfortable on the eyes, and some people do find it more comfortable on the eyes. The eyes spend less time accommodating to changes in light from the monitor, so that's the theory anyway. It's supposed to be a bit more comfortable. I now have the main menu open. It is set out in Samsung's Game UX style, I believe they call it. It has various little quick references to things like the refresh rate that the monitor is currently running at, whether FreeSync's enabled, whether low input lag mode is enabled. I'll come on to all of this in a little bit, response time setting you're using, and also the black equalizer setting you're using. The top of the menu, the first section of the menu I should say, is game. This allows you to adjust to one of the picture modes, the presets of the monitor. There's custom, high brightness, FPS, RTS, RPG, AOS, sRGB and cinema. Some of these are explored in the review, the ones I find more useful. I'm not really fussed about these game presets like AOS and RPG. They just sort of upset the image, make it overly sharp, oversaturated, and I mean that's not unique to this monitor at all. It's something that many monitors do with their presets, so I much prefer the custom setting or the sRGB, which is an emulation mode, if you need to use that. The refresh rate option is greyed out because I have FreeSync enabled. There is Ultimate Engine and Standard Engine. That's explored a little bit in the review. It changes the variable refresh rate range that you can use, or you can disable FreeSync. That will allow you to manually change the refresh rate of the monitor. So this isn't greyed out anymore, and you can quickly select 144, 120, 100 or 60 Hz. There's a black equalizer setting, and I'm going to open Lagom, the website, to show you what this does. It's very similar to BenQ's black equalizer. They were the first manufacturer to have what they call a black equalizer. And this adjusts the gamma curve of the monitor so that it highlights details in games in dark areas, and it makes dark shades more visible, lighter than they should be, to give people a competitive advantage. Or you can do it the other way. You can reduce it so that certain dark shades appear deeper. It doesn't change black. Black remains black. That's dependent on the black point of the monitor, the contrast capabilities of the monitor, but it does change these slightly lighter shades than black. So it's on 13, the default at the moment. If I reduce it, you can see that those shades become more visible, so that would give you a competitive advantage in a game if you're that way inclined. Now increasing it again, so it's at its default 13. And if you increase it, it makes those shades slightly less visible. This won't be clear on the video in terms of you won't see exactly what I'm seeing. That's not possible on a video. Depends on your own monitor and YouTube and my camera and all of that stuff. but that setting's there if you want to use it anyway. There's a response time setting, which is explored in the review. Standard is the normal mode, which will give you the sort of the flicker-free operation of the backlight, and give you various options which aren't available in faster or fastest, because the faster or fastest mode activate the strobe backlight feature called impulsive scanning, which is again explored in the review. You can now see a flickering on the video. I mean, the flickering isn't as obvious as it is on the video in terms of you can't really see like lines dashing down the screen or anything like that, but users who are sensitive to flickering will not like this. It causes the monitor to flicker at a refresh rate matching the refresh rate of the monitor, very much like a CRT, old CRTs used to do, if you're old enough to remember them, or you're unlucky enough to have some of them in your workplace. And the faster and fastest modes are very similar, as explored in the review. Again, fairly similar strobing behaviour there. With this enabled, you can't have FreeSync enabled at the same time. You also can't activate, you can't change the brightness setting, which I'll come on to in the picture mode shortly. So you're stuck with a high brightness whether you like it or not, unless you reduce the contrast, and again, it's explored in the review. Low input lag. That isn't enabled, that isn't available when you've got FreeSync enabled. That's actually because it's just on anyway with FreeSync. It uses the sort of lowest input lag it can when FreeSync is on anyway. But with FreeSync off, you can turn that on or off. I haven't noticed any disadvantage to having it off, so I would just leave it on. Why not? There's a screen size setting, and there is no one-to-one pixel mapping feature on this monitor. However, it does have various sort of emulation settings for different screen sizes. So you can have it looking like a 17-inch 4x3 monitor, 19-inch 4x3, 19-inch wide. I mean, you can read these yourself. You know, there are a few different options. Goes up to 23-inch wide, 16x9. And auto and wide just dictates how it'll display the image, whether it'll stretch it or sort of maintain the proper aspect ratio if you're using a non-native resolution of a different aspect ratio to 16:9. There's an option to save settings, and what this allows you to do is it doesn't just save the stuff on your game section of the menu, it saves everything as one of these game settings, these hotkeys which I mentioned before at the bottom of the monitor. So you can have 3 different sets of settings saved, which is very convenient. Next is the picture mode. The picture menu. This allows you to adjust the brightness, the contrast, the sharpness. I should also mention actually first, if you twiddle the joystick left or right, you can adjust the volume of anything connected to the 3.5mm jack of the monitor. If you just twiddle it up and down without entering the quick menu, you can quickly adjust the brightness, contrast and sharpness. The sharpness actually goes up in increments of 4, and you can set that between 0 and 100 in increments of 4. I find the default of 60 absolutely fine on this monitor, but you know, some people have different preferences, so you can adjust the sharpness slightly. Colour allows you to manually configure the red, green and blue colour channels. This isn't necessarily available in all preset modes or various other settings you're using, but it certainly is in the custom preset that I'm using at the moment. Or you can use one of the preset colour modes if you prefer. One of the more useful ones is Warm 2. This is the low blue light setting, but unlike the iSaver mode, it doesn't massively reduce the contrast. And I actually have I use this myself for comfortable viewing in the evenings, and I have that assigned to one of my gaming presets, so I can quickly activate or deactivate the low blue light setting. So that's a nice little feature. There are 3 different gamma modes as well, again explored in the review. There are various on-screen display settings. You can change the language it's displayed in, or you can change the idle timeout period. And quite useful, Samsung actually tells you what all of these settings do at the right here. You've probably noticed that. So there's not really much use in me, going through everything and talking about it and boring you to death. It actually says what everything does for you. So this particular one says set how long the menu window will appear will remain on screen for when it's not in use. So if you're not pressing any buttons, the OSD will remain active for that long before automatically disappearing. You can of course exit it manually by just pressing the left arrow sufficient number of times. And by left arrow I mean twiddling the joystick left. There's also System. This allows you to turn on and off the ambient lighting feature of the monitor. It's got a sort of ring of LEDs at the back. I'll turn this on and show you them. I'll also turn my lights off so I can show you how this works in a dark room. It's a bit easier to see. The joys of Philips Hue lighting, I can actually turn my lights off without moving from my seat. Very nice. So as you can see, or perhaps not see, there's actually a very gentle glow behind the monitor. And this comes from, you can see it if I move the camera back here. So sort of a ring of sort of cool blue or slightly white LEDs around the stand attachment point. If you want, you can actually remove the ring. I'm not going to do that now. You can remove the ring, which makes it a little bit brighter. But, you know, as you can see in the video, it's not particularly bright against the wall. I mean, some people like it anyway, but it's not like a bias light. It doesn't really give you a prominent light source behind the monitor, really. If you remove the ring, it is a little bit brighter, but still, it's not, you know, massively bright. There's local dimming, which is explored in the review. If you have that set to auto, it will activate when HDR is active, as it says there. Or you can have it always disabled, whether you've got HDR or SDR content being displayed, or you can have it always enabled. Again, this is explored in the review. It isn't something I'm going to explore again in this video. Volume, which I've already talked about. There aren't integrated speakers on this monitor, but it does have a 3.5mm headphone jack. I should also actually have mentioned the lighting feature. I'm not going to show you this because it's not particularly exciting really, but the lighting does actually pulse if you've got music playing or any audio playing, and it sort of brightens a bit and pulses really in time with the music. Or any other audio you're playing. But you do have to remember the audio has to be routed through the monitor, which, I mean, I don't do, which is why I'm not even going to bother showing this video. But if you do use the headphone jack of the monitor when you route the audio through, you can have the little lighting feature sort of pulse along with the audio. EcoSaving Plus just adjusts the brightness to various different levels. Auto seems to be very similar to the brightness setting I'm already using. High makes the image very dim. I mean, all this does is it just adjusts the brightness slightly. It doesn't do anything you can't do with manual adjustment as well. It's just for people who are a bit... I don't want to be insulting, but it's for people who don't realise that if you lower the brightness of the monitor, it uses less power. That's all it is. There's an off timer feature, which will automatically turn the monitor off after a set period of time, unless you twiddle the joystick or interact with the monitor through the OSD and tell it not to. So you can have it automatically turn off after 1 hour, or anything up to between that and 23 hours. I believe this might actually be on by default, so do check, you know, if you have your monitor bugging you that it's going to turn itself off and it's annoying you, make sure the off timer feature's off. And if it's still bugging you and the off timer feature's off, I might be remembering incorrectly, I think this was the case with my unit, just turn it on and then off again. There's PC/AV mode, that's just compatibility for older games consoles. It's not relevant to new games consoles or PCs or anything like that. USB supercharging, if you connect things to the USB ports of the monitor and you want it to sort of fast charge devices, then you can enable that. If you do enable it, it does increase the power consumption of the monitor a bit, even if you're not actually actively charging with the USB ports, and that's why it's off by default. There's not a huge difference in power consumption, it is still a difference nonetheless. You can change the DisplayPort version. 1.1, 1.2, 1.2 plus, which is technically 1.4 or up to 1.4. This is just relevant if you're using an older GPU and you don't want to, you can't get an image if you've got a certain DisplayPort version connected, used on the monitor, sorry. And in my case, I'm using 1.2. That's because at the moment I'm using a AMD Radeon 290. This does not support HDR. However, if you use 1.2 plus, the monitor uses this kind of strange pseudo HDR, even though my GPU doesn't support it. And if you're running an application that supports HDR, it'll sort of go into this fake HDR mode. It looks like complete rubbish. It's not like proper HDR, which I do explore in the review. So I just keep this on 1.2 because it stops the monitor trying to use this fake HDR mode. Again, if you didn't understand what I was saying just then, please understand I'm not saying that this monitor has a fake HDR feature. If you do have a GPU that supports it properly, it does give you a decent experience, and I do explore that in the review. You can, the same with the HDMI mode, you can change that if you've got it just connected through HDMI, which I don't at the moment. You can automatically have the monitor automatically select the source it's using, or manually select the source, which is useful if you've got multiple things connected to the monitor, multiple video sources. Change the key repeat time, so that's sort of the behaviour when you press buttons or use the joystick. Acceleration works just fine for me. Samsung have had this as a legacy feature for ages. I don't really think it's particularly relevant. You can change, there's a power LED, you can't see it at the moment, it's just sort of a gentle blue colour, dark blue. You can have it so it's on when the monitor is working, as they say, which means it's on. So the monitor's on, power LED is on, but by default it's set to standby, so that power LED is off, unless the monitor is in a low power state in standby, and then the blue light will flash. Unless you hold the joystick in, as I said, or you've turned the monitor off. And when I say off, I mean off using the power button, which is technically still standby. There's also an option to reset everything to the factory defaults. Finally, there is an information section, and this, I'm just going to open an application so I can show you a few things this shows. It gives you the full model code. The preferred shortened version of that is just C27HG70, or the 27-inch version of the HG70 series. I will just, it also shows you the serial number, it shows you the resolution and the refresh rate that's being used. I've got FreeSync disabled because I was showing you the low input lag setting before. But if I enable FreeSync and you've got something using FreeSync, and actually I believe even if you're not actively using FreeSync, the information section says AMD FreeSync 2, which this monitor supports, as I explored in the review, and that refresh rate thing there, it actually fluctuates according to the refresh rate, the frame rate of the content. And it always shows you the resolution that the monitor's running at. So if you are using a non-native resolution and you're a bit confused as to whether your monitor is using interpolation and scaling everything for you, or whether it's your GPU doing it, take note of what resolution is given there, because if that is always 2560 by 1440, even if you think you're running a lower resolution on your game or whatever, that means that your GPU is handling the scaling. If, however, this changes along with the resolution, it means the monitor is handling the scaling. So that's really all there is to the OSD, on-screen display menu system, of the Samsung C27HG70. Be sure to check out the full review on pcmonitors.info. There's a link to that and a few other things, including how you can support the work that we do, in the description of the video.